Welcome to the League of Women Voters Civic Buzz. Tonight our topic is effective advocacy, making your voice heard. Before we begin, I want to let you know that this program is being recorded. The recording will be available unedited on the Civic Buzz page of the Minneapolis League website. Also, we will take questions at the end. You can put them in the chat anytime if you'd like us to ask them, or use the raise hand function after the presentation. With that, let's get started. Our guest tonight probably needs no introduction for most of you. Kitty Westin has been an active member of the Minneapolis League for many years. She served in many leadership roles, most recently as co-president and then immediate past president. But you may not know that Kitty has successfully advocated for passage of major legislation in the US Congress and has made some powerful friends and learned important lessons about advocacy, which she'll share with us tonight. Kitty presented to our Women Defending Democracy group earlier this year, and I was so blown away. It was immediately obvious to me that we need all of our Minneapolis leaders to hear her story. So please welcome our own Kitty Westin.
Okay, well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, League of Women Voters Minneapolis, for having me do the Civic Buzz tonight to talk about something that I am extremely passionate about. And thank you all for coming and being here tonight. We really appreciate the participation. Okay, first slide, please. Okay. So next slide. We are going to talk today about advocacy. And I'm going to start with a little bit about my story and how I came to be an advocate all these many years. And then I'm going to do something that I've done in Washington, I don't even know how many times, basic training and a message training about effective advocacy. It's not rocket science, but there's some skills that are really important that make your efforts in advocacy just more effective. And then I plan on having at least 15 minutes at the end to for a question and answer session and a discussion. So as Lisa said, please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along, and then she will ask me those questions, or raise your hand at the end and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So next slide, please. Before I get started, I just felt compelled to just take a moment to remember and unite in solidarity against the hate and the violence that happened in our city a week ago. Let's remember Fletcher and Harper and the 21 other people that were injured, their families, their friends, our whole community. It has been a horrific week for many of us. And I appreciate that people are uniting together, putting ribbons on trees. That's all really important. Next slide, please. What is really, really almost more important, though, is remembering and sending our love and our thoughts and our prayers to the families, to the community is important, but it's just plain not enough. Next slide, Anne. So we need to move with our feet. This picture moved me so much when I saw it the day of the school shooting. And it epitomizes what we're doing here. It's a woman with her shoes off, running towards the danger, running towards the school. We don't know if she's a mom, caretaker, teacher. We don't know her story. What we know is she's an advocate. She's running towards, she wants to help. Fred Rogers taught our young children to, in times of danger, in times when you're afraid, find the helpers. And that's really important. And I think what we need to do is we need to all be those helpers. I really believe that this picture should win a Pulitzer Prize. It tells the story. And we're going to talk about that a little later, about how a picture of just a couple of words are the really powerful advocacy. So next slide. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about my journey into advocacy. I actually call myself an accidental advocate. I was not an advocate until February 17th, 2000. That was the day my amazing, incredible, funny, charming, articulate, beautiful 21-year-old daughter died as a direct result of an eating disorder. She was born on February 27th. She died on February 17th, 2000. She was 21 years old. She was first diagnosed with an eating disorder when she was 16, and she went into a specialized treatment program and did quite well. But at the time, there wasn't much talk about eating disorders. There wasn't much support for families. I didn't really understand them. And I'll tell you, full disclosure here, I'm a licensed psychologist. And when I was going to school to become a licensed psychologist, we talked about all the diagnoses in the DSM, and eating disorders was part of that. And I don't think we spent half an hour talking about eating disorders. So I was really unprepared for what was going on. When Anna was 20 years old, she relapsed. And it was a horrific, like a train wreck, how fast it went downhill, and she needed to get to the hospital very, very quickly. We took her to the hospital, and she was seen by the physician that treated eating disorders. And it didn't take him long to say, she needs to be admitted to the hospital right now. Her vital signs are failing, her organs are failing, she will die without treatment. And a couple minutes later, the business office called and said, well, you have to take her home because we have to wait for your insurance company to tell us that she can have that level of care. I was horrified and stunned that happened, because to me it was like, well, this treatment team determined that she was very, very ill and that she needed to get treatment for her eating disorder. And why is the insurance company saying that they have to think about authorizing the care? That set us on a journey that was a revolving door. Anna would be admitted to the hospital for a couple of days. She would begin to improve a little bit. The insurance company would say that treatment was no longer medically necessary, inpatient treatment, that she was stable, which was never the case, ever. And they would send her home. Now, we said, no, we're not taking her home. She needs to be here. The team knows she needs to be here. But Anna was 20 years old at the time, and a 20-year-old can make those decisions for herself. And so she could check herself out of the hospital, and she'd be home for a few days, and then something would happen and she'd go back. So it was just a horrific time in our lives. And Anna and I, at times, we would talk about how difficult it was and how painful it was, and how the lack of access to care was really making her illness much more serious. And that someday we were going to work together to try to change that. And tragically, on February 17th, 2000, Anna died by suicide. That's the second leading cause of death for people with anorexia nervosa, because there's so much helplessness and despair that go along with that disease. And that launched me into this purposeful life of mine to try to address some of those issues. What happened there was, we were writing an obituary, and honestly, that was one of the worst things that we had to do after her death. It was incredibly painful because we had to talk about it. It made it real. And and at the beginning, we're with the funeral director, and he's very kind, and he says to us, Well, oftentimes when people, if it's a mental illness or died by suicide, that people state that their loved one died at home or died unexpectedly. And we're just, no, no, no. We are not ashamed of our daughter. She had a real illness. She didn't have a behavior problem. It wasn't a choice. We want to state that she died from an eating disorder. And I didn't realize at the time that that wasn't being done, and that was something that nobody talked about. And then at the end, he asked us, what would you like people to send flowers? Do you have a favorite organization you want people to send donations to? And I looked at my husband, I said, send donations to the Anna Westin Foundation. And he gave me one of these looks like, what? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. It just came to me. And what happened then was the obituary got published in the local paper and in our little local paper and in the Minneapolis paper, and people started calling and people started reaching out to us and people started sending money to us for this foundation. And we realized really quickly that this was something that needed to be talked about. And we realized that while we couldn't bring Anna back, maybe we could transform the horror of her death into something positive, and maybe that would help someone else not experience the same tragic fate that our daughter Anna did. I'm going to pause here because before I go into the kind of the real nuts and bolts of advocacy, I asked my dear friend Amy Klobuchar if she would speak to us and talk about the importance of grassroots activism. So let's hear from Amy.
Rise, hosted by the League of Women Voters Minneapolis. You are gathered today because you know, like I know, that grassroots advocacy is critical to our democracy. The League of Women Voters does so much incredible work to get more people engaged. From registering voters to giving people the tools to be more informed, you make our democracy stronger. And today, once again, you're helping people get involved as advocates. I can't think of a better person to present on this topic than Kitty Westin. She's a leader and advocate who exemplifies what it means to transform a tragedy in your own life to help others. Kitty's daughter Anna was diagnosed with anorexia when she was 16. Despite the urgency of Anna's condition, the family was told they had to wait until their insurance company certified her disease, delaying and limiting the treatment that Anna received. Sadly, Anna passed away after struggling with anorexia for 5 years. She was only 21 years old. Kitty didn't want to see another person go through what Anna did, so she took action. We worked together to pass a law that ensures that residential treatment for eating disorders is covered by insurance, and we call it the Anna Westin Act. Kitty was there for the hearings. She was there when we had senators that maybe weren't so sure about what to do, or the House, and we did it together. Kitty continues to be an incredible advocate in eating disorder prevention and treatment. And more than that, she shows all of us that democracy isn't just a structure of government, it is an ongoing project that we all have a hand in finishing. When any of you decides to be an advocate for the issues you care about, you make our democracy stronger. So, what you need to know about our democracy. I thought about it a lot when I had to prepare a speech for the inauguration. I was chairing it no matter who won, and so I chaired this year's inauguration. And I decided I have 4 minutes and I'm going to say something that I think will last. I shared 3 things that I believe will stand the test of time. First of all, even though our democracy, as I noted, has been a hot mess for a while, it is on us, to quote our state's own Bob Dylan, to be the shelter from the storm. And we have to cherish it and hold it up and act as leaders in our own communities. Second, in some countries, the inauguration is held in gilded presidential palaces, but in America, It's held at the Capitol, the People's House, for a reason. It's because we have three equal branches of government. It's a reminder of our system of checks and balances and that our founders were fearful of a power grab from any branch. That's why they set it up the way they did. So remember, when you're advocating for whatever issue you're advocating for, there are three equal branches of government in our nation, in our state. We also have branches of government, and remember to not give up on any one branch. And the third thing I said that day was that whether it's a new member of Congress or whether it's the President of the United States, the power that they had that day didn't come from inside the rotunda, no matter how many billionaires were there. They came from the people. They came from you. That's why I want to encourage you to learn as much as you can from Kitty today, so you can continue to be great advocates tomorrow. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your commitment to our democracy. Keep up the great work.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So just to wrap up a little bit of my story, and to piggyback on what Amy just told us about grassroots activism, we started the Anna Westin Foundation. It's now called With All, and 25 years later, we're still doing amazing work. We're helping people pay for expenses when they need higher levels of care. We're doing a lot of education prevention work, and all the work that I done with an eating disorder coalition, which I was a founding member in 2000. We've passed several pieces of legislation that affect people with eating disorders, including the Anna Westin Act of 2016. So the next slide, please. Let's move on to talk a little bit about what is advocacy. And honestly, all of you that are here, if you're a member of the league, and you might be a volunteer with voter services, you might be a volunteer with the forums that we do, you might sit on one of our committees and work on climate issues or education. You might observe the park board. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that league members get involved. And those of you who are guests here tonight, thank you very much for showing up. I believe that you are also advocates because you're here tonight and interested in this. And my guess is that you are pretty active in the issues that you're really passionate about. So really, advocacy is speaking up, standing up, and showing up. And it's refusing to be silenced. It's refusing to step away. It's refusing to be to be canceled. It's saying that this is a really important issue to me, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to be the bridge between caring about this issue and actually having getting stuff done, taking action. And as I said earlier, advocacy, it's not rocket science. You are all advocates. You do things every day, I'm sure. But there are some skills to advocacy. And to be an effective advocate, you really need to have a purpose. And that purpose, people have different issues they care deeply about. When I started, it was eating disorders. And you have to prepare, because when you are talking about a particular issue, you have to know enough about that issue to really articulate that and to understand it and to share that and to help other people understand that issue. So preparation is really important. And then this final one, persistence, it is a process, and it can be really frustrating. And there's times when you feel really discouraged because nothing seems to happen. But I can tell you with conviction that grassroots activism works, and it changes systems, and it changes minds, and it does amazing things in our communities. So persistence is really important. It took us 16 years to pass the Anna Westin Act. And I have been called many things. One time a pit bull, because I latch onto something and I refuse to let go. I was told out in Washington many times, people say, well, do you work for one of the members? You're here all the time. And it's like, and I'm not leaving. I'm going to keep showing up in your office and I'm going to keep talking about this. Okay, next slide, please. So I was really fortunate to have Paul Wellstone, the late Senator Paul Wellstone, as one of my mentors in advocacy. He encouraged me to tell my story, to bring it to Washington, D.C., and he told me, bring as many other people with you as possible and come to Capitol Hill because it's a very powerful way to get your message across. And so at the time I thought, okay, I'll do that. And we started the Eating Disorders Coalition. Paul Wellstone was a grassroots activist from the very beginning. His first run for Senate and his green bus that his son Dave is actually refurbishing, and it's going to be showing up places, which is exciting. And then President Obama, who actually started in Chicago as a community organizer. So they're great role models. Next slide, please. So right now in our country, we are in a constitutional crisis. The League of Women Voters, US, has determined that. And let me just talk for a second about the League of Women Voters. We have positions on things. We don't take positions on individual candidates, but we take positions on issues that are important to us. And one of the positions we have taken now is that we are in a constitutional crisis and we all need to work together. And why is this so important now? Well, there are many, many signs that are pointing to our democracy turning into a authoritarian form of government. And there's so many examples. We're inundated every single day. I don't know about you, but you open the paper or you listen to the news and you hear something else that just doesn't make sense. It's against the law. It's against our Constitution. It's attempts to overturn fair and free elections. It's sowing doubt in our elections. It's normalizing political violence. It's gutting institutions and agencies, the CDC and the DOJ and the Department of Education, and I could go on and on. It's deploying the National Guard into our cities without any clear reason why they need to be there. It's threatening journalists and attorneys and universities if they don't go along with the beliefs of the administration. It's spreading disinformation and again sowing doubts in the very core of our democracy. And it's weakening those checks and balances that Amy told us about. It's weakening our Congress and the judicial system. So right now, it's really important to be an advocate. Advocates empower groups. So if we're a group and we believe in something, we can join with other groups and we can all speak out. And there really is power in numbers when you're doing grassroots activism. It gives us a seat at the table. And I can't emphasize this enough. Because in Washington and all my times testifying before Congress and meeting with people, the lobbyists have a seat at the table. And many of the lobby firms, their people make six figures and they're being paid to sell something, to sell whatever it is that the organization that's hiring them wants to sell. And the example in my case is the insurance companies. So I was asked to testify at a congressional hearing about mental health parity and why we needed to pass a new version of the mental health parity bill. And I'm sitting at the table with Rosalind Carter. And I don't know if you remember this, but Rosalind Carter's issue was mental health and addiction. The other two people that were testifying that day were, I called the suits. They were lobbyists from the insurance companies, and they got to tell their side of the story. And they were talking about if insurance companies were mandated to pay for mental health treatment, they would go broke because it would be so expensive and they couldn't possibly do it. And the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, we had all the numbers from them and they said, no, it's absolutely not true. That's not going to happen. So they had the seat at the table. We had a seat at the table and we got to tell our side of the story. And if we hadn't been there, nobody would have been telling our side of the story. And our stories from grassroots activists have so much power and so much sway. And so I can't emphasize enough how important that is. You know, it also, being a valid advocate, it validates and encourages you to tell your own story, to trust in your own story, to realize that, to empower you to tell your own story. And again, I'm going to say this again, there's power in numbers. And the more people that are joining together and talking about an issue, it just amplifies your voice. And some of you may know the famous Bobby Kennedy quote, the ripples of hope from a million different directions. People are speaking out, and that creates these ripples of hope that create a tsunami and can really change systems. And that is so true. It builds awareness. When we're advocating, when we're out there talking to people, we're educating people in the community, in our schools, in our churches, and it creates solidarity because other people will join in and say, yes, this is important. And it helps us understand that on our issue, we're the experts. We really know this stuff. And that's a really important thing, to be, again, empowered, because we are the people that understand an issue very deeply. Next slide, please. So what's your role as an advocate? I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between policymakers, our elected officials, and advocates. So policymakers have thousands of issues. Everybody wants their attention. Everybody has an issue they want to talk about. And advocates have one issue typically. We're in there to talk about one thing. Policymakers have limited understanding of all these issues. They can't possibly, and I'm not faulting them. They can't know all the issues. We as advocates have in-depth knowledge about our issue. Policymakers are spread very, very thin. They are pulled in so many different directions. You know, in any given day, week, they have hundreds of people that want their attention and want them to do something on a policy or an issue that they care about. We're typically dedicated to a cause and pretty focused on that cause. Not that we're not spread pretty thin, because we're all working really hard right now. Policymakers have to be able to negotiate. Now, this used to be much more true when you're dealing on Capitol Hill. People were much more willing to cross the aisle and work together to get something done. With the extreme partisan nature of Washington right now, it's not happening as much. Hopefully we'll get back to that. Advocates, we don't really want to compromise. We have this issue, we have our ideas of what needs to change and what needs to happen, and it's kind of hard to compromise. I have a story about that when we were advocating for mental health parity. So after our Senator Paul Wellstone died in a plane crash, mental health parity was being debated, and we were trying to pass a new parity bill. His son David Wellstone picked up the mantle, and he and I spent days, weeks in Washington, sitting with our senators and members of the House, talking about why mental health parity is important. At the end of the day, close to when that was going to be brought up for a vote, I was sitting in a room with Jim Ramstad, who was the champion in the House, and Ted Kennedy, who was the champion in the Senate, Dave Wellstone and I, and some other staff people. And there was a provision in the bill that was a non-starter in the Senate. And Ted Kennedy turned to me and said, we have to take that language out. And it would have been language that would have ensured that all diagnoses in the DSM would be covered. And that it was a non-starter. So he looked at me and he said, we have to take that language out. Can you live with that? And I was taken aback by the respect he paid me, and that I didn't want to compromise. I wanted to say no, but I knew that I needed to say yes, that I could live with that, because I wanted to be able to live to fight another day. I wanted to be able to come back and work with the people and eventually pass a bill that would accomplish the goals for the eating disorder community, which we did. So policymakers are really driven by reelection. They need to listen to their constituents. We're seeing that a lot these days with policymakers that don't push back on things because they're so afraid they're going to lose their job. And the ones that do push back sometimes do actually lose their jobs. We see a lot of policymakers, when they've announced they're going to retire, start pushing back harder because they are not fearful anymore. And we're advocates, we are driven by our passion. We are putting, hours and hours and hours into these issues because we are passionate about changing things. Okay, so moving on. Next slide, please. So what's your role? So to be an advocate, we've kind of tried to sum it up in pretty simple terms. And again, it's not rocket science, but it's important to understand what your role is. So when we bring advocates out to Washington, D.C., we form teams, and they're usually based in, the state, a Minnesota team, a Wisconsin team, Tennessee team, whatever. And we train our advocates to tell their own personal story. And when you're working with a member of the House or the Senate or their staff, you really have very limited time. If you get a meeting, our team, maybe the whole meeting would be 15, 20 minutes at most. And if we had a team of 4 or 5 people, they would each be asked to tell their story, but they basically get, 3 minutes or less. And then we also train our advocates to tell their story in what we call an elevator speech. So think about, you're in an elevator, you have, 30 seconds to say something to somebody. And I tell you, in Washington, you run into people in the elevator, in the halls, in the underground, in a restaurant, on the street, and you recognize them and you want to catch their attention for just a couple seconds and tell your story. It's really important to be able to sum it up very, very quickly. And there's ways to do that. We want our advocates to be authentic. We want them to be honest, to tell their stories in a way that is true to who they are and how they're feeling. We talk about the importance of showing emotion and being okay with that, but to be measured in that, because we don't want somebody to get very, very angry because the person is going to just back off and stop listening. We don't want the person to get overly emotional and sobbing, because again, that makes people uncomfortable, and we can't tell our stories that way. So we try to help people figure out a way to tell that story in a way that's real and honest and authentic, but not overly emotional. And a little story about that. One time during an advocacy day, I was working with a team from New York, and we were in Christian Gillibrand's office, and one of my team members got very angry and started berating her for a vote she took, and really inappropriately talking to, yelling at her. And I had to get up and take her out of the room and then go in and try to apologize. And I had to call our leader and say, this is what happened. And Christian Gillibrand had been a real supporter of us, and that really hurt the relationship. And it took a very long time for her to trust us again and to be able to go into her office and get an audience with her. We eventually healed that. But I felt really bad for the woman. She had a horrific story. And she lost control. And so as leaders, we're trained too to how to handle those situations. Be concise. I already talked about that. You really don't have a lot of time when you are talking to a member. They are on very strict schedules, and no matter how you're communicating. So I really discourage people sending really long emails, 3-4 page emails. They're not going to read them. They don't have time. They might have a staff review it. So however you communicate, being able, or even on the phone, just being concise. This is what I'm calling about. This is what I'm asking. This is why I'm calling. And then what we train our advocates to do is to tie their personal story to the message. What I mean by that is when we bring groups to Washington, we will have a particular message. Right now, we're talking about doing some work around nutrition in schools. And we ask our advocates to tell their story that ties to the message. And we talk a lot about having a united message. So if we have a group of 200 advocates in Washington and teams spreading out over Capitol Hill, we want everybody to be basically giving the same overall message. The stories are all different, how they, tie to the message, but it's really powerful if everybody is on message and stays on message. And it gets very confusing for members and staff if they're hearing a lot of different things from different people. And we actually have to tell people, if you have your own, another issue that you care about, or if you have a brochure about your foundation, please don't bring it to that meeting. You can do that after you can get that to the person. But we want to be really laser focused on our message to be most effective. And then we always say, take cues from your organization. And so right now, taking cues from the League of Women Voters, on looking at our policy, our positions on things, and understanding what the clear message is. Next slide, please. So
Kitty, I'm gonna give you the 20-minute notice.
no,
Yeah.
oh my God, I can't believe it.
Okay.
Okay, so we've come up with this list of components of a successful story. And what they are is just what we have found is really effective in helping advocates ahead of time write out their story, and then we help them practice it when they get out there to Washington. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm happy to send this to anybody who wants it, and you can go through it. The most important parts is the number one, start with your goal in mind, and the last one, the finish, the hook. What are we asking there? What are we there for? What is the ask? And then the rest of it is how you set the stage for all of that. Next slide, please. So really quickly, another picture that is so powerful and told a story with very few words. We're out in Washington. We're Advocacy Day, a young man shows up. I've never met him. He's never been to an Advocacy Day before. He's from Wisconsin. I'm leading Wisconsin, Minnesota. He sits down and he introduces himself. And I say, well, welcome. It's so nice you're here, Nathan. What's your story? And he opens his iPad and he pulls up this picture and he shows it to us. And he says, these are my children at my wife's grave. She died from anorexia 6 weeks ago because our insurance would not cover the cost of her care. It took all the air out of the room. And we were meeting with Senator House Speaker Paul Ryan later that day. And I said, Nathan, I want you to tell that story exactly how you told it right now. We met with Representative Speaker Ryan. Nathan pulls out the picture. He says those few words, and we finish the meeting. We're wrapping up, standing up, start to leave the office, and Paul Ryan stops me and says, Kitty, I have one more question for you. I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, who wouldn't support this bill? It was incredible. And that's how powerful a picture, a story, a few words can be. So let's move on to message training. So we're going to go through this really quickly, and we're just going to use the SAVE Act as an example, because the SAVE Act is really a great example of somebody trying to fix a non-existent problem. There is very little voter fraud in the country. A handful of cases ever get prosecuted. It's so rare that it could never change the outcome of an election. It has been proven over and over again, no matter how many times they, check the voting rolls. It's a non-existent problem. Yet there are many people that are really pushing to pass the SAVE Act, and it actually passed in the House this spring. I have it on very good authority, Amy Klobuchar, that it is very unlikely that it's going to make it to the floor of the Senate. It just doesn't have enough votes for closure, so they won't bring it to the floor unless they know they can get the number of votes. So that's a really good thing. But next slide, please. What the message is we took the League of Women Voters position on the SAVE Act. And it's basically, it sounds harmless, but it is a dangerous step towards voter suppression, and we want people to oppose it. Now, in our case, we don't need to call Amy Klobuchar or Tina Smith and ask them to oppose it, because we know they do oppose it. But what we could do is call them or text them or send them a note thanking them for opposing it, because they don't get that a lot. They don't get a lot of people thanking them for what they do. Or we can talk about it to our friends and families who don't live in Minnesota and let them know that they might live in a state where their senators will support it, and ask them if they know anybody, if they could possibly help us oppose the SAVE Act. So what we want people to do is to look at the position, understand that, and then be on message. And the bottom line is we oppose the SAVE Act for all those reasons. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to put this in here because I know there's lots of people that, don't understand, and, our voting rights and civil rights really threatened. And I think what we're all finding is that when our president says things like telling the Smithsonian that they focus too much on how bad slavery was, which is a throwback to Jim Crow, and, really wanting a world where Black people and poor people and women don't have a voice. And that's horrifying to me that that's happening. and that recently what our president said was, I have a right to do anything I want to do. I'm the president of the United States. That's authoritarianism right there. And so we are in a constitutional crisis, and we are really needing to step up and speak up and be persistent and keep working towards making sure that we can defend and keep our democracy as we know it for generations to come. So next slide, please. When I talked about earlier about understanding the issue and knowing the facts, we do a lot of research before we go into any office. We research things of how they voted in the past, and we have all our facts straight, and we look up the where those facts came from. We double check and triple check to make sure we're not saying anything that is misinformation before we ever go in and talk to a policymaker. And going back to the voting rights and to the SAVE Act, is that again, there's just a handful of cases ever that have been prosecuted for voter fraud, and that the reality is that there's many states that are really working hard to restrict voting laws, and those changes that were put in place for the 2024 election, the states that were able to do that really do have an impact. And one of the things that is happening now is, more of that. All of the states that are, there's been 322 bills that would restrict voting rights, and many of them don't pass, but some do. And that's just a horrifying thing. So the other things that are happening is that there's, the legal challenges to voting rights and executive orders that are stripping people's rights, and so many efforts. And now the gerrymandering and the redistricting that is going to, and they're not even shy about it, that, they want to win the next election, and they're going to gerrymander, which is illegal, against the Constitution. It's supposed to happen every 10 years after the census. And in fact, now the census, they're not going to count people that are illegal, which was, that's illegal as well. And so they're doing so many things that are going to undermine our democracy and voting rights, which is why the League of Women Voters has been, really putting a lot of attention on this and really working hard to help people understand, and working hard to activate people and get people to be advocates across the nation to protect our voting rights and protect our civil rights. Next slide, please. So I want to circle back to what Amy Klobuchar was talking about, because I listened to that, and then I went back and listened to her remarks during the inauguration. And I found them fascinating and very powerful. And like she said, she was determined to use those 4 minutes to have an impact and to help people understand their role. As she said, our inauguration takes place at the Capitol and outside, where the people can come and be part of it, because we are our democracy. And I loved it when she said our democracy is a hot mess right now. And that we all have that responsibility to be the leaders in our communities. And when she talked about Bob Dylan, and it's on us to be the shelter from the storm and to act as those leaders. And right now, that's vitally important. And she also talked about the importance of unity amid division. So how can we, unite people? How can we bring people in? How can we give everybody a voice respectfully? And And in a democracy, every citizen, regardless of interest in politics, holds office. And what that means is we elect these people. It's our job to hold them accountable. It's our job to tell them that, reminding them that we are their boss and they need to listen to the people. And again, the big rallies and people uniting together, it's a really powerful force and people pay attention to it. And I'll say it again, don't give up because it's on us. We absolutely have to stay in this for the long haul. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I get it. Some of us are tired. Some of us get feeling defeated. Some of us feel like, what does it matter? Does my voice hold any weight? Let me tell you this, that what happens when you communicate with a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives, that there are people that are just looking at those communications. And they are the people that are sitting at the front desk, answering the phones, that are checking the emails, that are following texts. And they're oftentimes interns. And what they're doing is ticking boxes. This many people called about this. This many people called about the SAVE Act. This many people support the SAVE Act. This many people don't support the SAVE Act. And it takes, listen to this, folks, this is true, 24 communications for somebody in that office to pay attention. So that's not very many. We could all get 24 of our family or friends to call about any issue. What happens then is the 24 communications about don't support the SAVE Act. Somebody in that office is going to, whoever took those messages is going to run it up the flagpole to chief of staff or the healthcare person or whoever the right person is in the office. That person is going to take a look at those comments, take a look at the remarks, and decide if they're going to take that to their boss. And so it's a really powerful thing. So never think that your voice isn't important. When you get those action alerts, and everybody makes those so simple now, including the league, it tells you who your member is. Oftentimes they'll give you a script. And the reason that happens is that point I was making before about staying on topic, on message, because we're calling about this issue and we want everybody to be giving that same message to the offices. And then oftentimes when there's a script, you're encouraged to say a couple sentences or write a couple sentences about why you care about this. So again, it's your own story, but it's on message. And then, the power of the elected official comes from us. It comes from the people that vote them into office. And we must remember, and Amy talked about this, is that there's our founding fathers created 3 separate but equal departments in the administration, the judicial, and Congress. And any one of those isn't supposed to have all the power. What's happening now is the administration is in a power grab, and it is trying to get all the power. It's ignoring the Constitution and the laws and kind of doing anything it wants to do. I had dinner with a federal attorney yesterday, a neighbor of ours, and he was, it was incredible listening to him talk about what's going on in the judicial branch, and how fearful he is that our democracy is collapsing for that reason. So the time is now. We absolutely have to be able to stand up and speak up and not be silenced and not let anybody tell us that our voice isn't important, because it absolutely is. So, okay, moving on. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Do not become bitter or hostile. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. We will find a way to make a way out of no way. John Lewis. So I ask you to think about that and to think about how you can make good trouble, and how we can all be part of the resistance and part of the effort to preserve our democracy, and move forward. All right, last slide, please, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So I do a lot of public speaking, and I always end with this last quote. I found this in Anna's journal. She wrote it days before her death. I believe that she wrote this to me, and I believe she wrote this to you. May all your love, joy, and pain, all your fears and desires lead you to your own promises. May your dreaming never end and your voice never die. So I'm going to leave you with that quote. And again, I believe that that was her gift to all of us, to encourage us to, again, speak up, stand up, do not be silenced. So I am right on time here. I would like to open this up to discussion, questions. Let's just open it up.
Okay.
So
Go
Lisa,
ahead,
do you want
Joanne.
to?
Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Joanne,
Oh, um, I'm trying to get the gallery on my iPad, but it's okay if you can hear me.
we can hear.
Kitty, could you, well, it was so fabulous. So much of it, all of it. But the SAVE Act, would you mind commenting a little bit more? I think I understand it. I know it's a dangerous thing. And you said it passed in the House, not in the Senate. Could you say more?
Sure, sure. Yes, and so the SAVE Act was, has been introduced in both, well, not in the Senate, but in the House. And it, like I said, it's really a bill that sounds okay on the surface, but
Yeah.
actually I have a handout about it that I was gonna look at real quick here. I don't say anything that's false because I'm all about making sure I have my facts right. So what it basically is going to do is restrict the vote by requiring voters to have, documentation when they show up at, like a passport or a birth certificate, things that are daunting for some people. They just simply don't have that. And, who comes with a passport to the voting booth, right? And it's requiring anybody who is like a name change, which is really going to hurt any woman that changed their name. Because if your birth certificate says Joanne Sorum and you show up and your passport or driver's license says Joanne Martin, guess what? You can't vote because it's not the same name. It's going to really hurt young voters and voters of color. I mean, all the groups that already are challenged. And the other thing, this is a really big part of it, is that it's going to make it really hard for us to do voter registrations because we, as League of Women Voters, and I know many of you spend many, many, many hours doing voter registration, we can get prosecuted if we register somebody and we didn't check their IDs and make sure everything, matched up. And so, and we register hundreds and thousands of people, every year. So that's gonna really, I think, damage, us, our efforts to register eligible people to vote. And
So
again,
that's part of the SAVE Act, what you just mentioned, what you
yeah,
just said.
yeah, yeah, oh
That's
yeah,
part of it.
yeah,
Well,
that's all part of it.
every state is different, isn't it, in what they require? I used to be an election judge for many years. There is some identification that is required as you check in to vote. This is extreme and obviously intended to disenfranchise people. But
Right.
how does that work from state to state to state?
Well, as you said, different states have different
Yes,
laws about what they,
right.
what people need. So this would be federal law, and federal law always
Ah,
supersedes state law. And so if this passes, Minnesota, even though we voted
ah,
down voter ID,
ah.
we would be required to follow federal law because federal law always trumps, oh, I hate that word, state law. Um, so
Okay.
it will affect every state. Um, and it's disastrous. It really is.
And you said it passed in the House, right?
It did pass in the House in the spring. Um,
And what's the chances now of this moving on?
Well, very slim right now, according to Amy, because what happens is the House passed their version, and the Senate now, if it goes to the floor, which Amy said it's not going to go to the floor anytime soon, because they don't like to bring bills to the floor unless they know that they
Mm,
have the votes. And
okay.
both parties do that. That's just what people do. Um,
Okay.
and they don't have the votes. It's a
Okay.
60 vote threshold to get cloture. And that's the first step in bringing a bill to the floor. And they just don't have it. So that's the good news, but they probably won't give up. So we have to be vigilant. And then what happens if the Senate passes a version of the bill, the House passes a version of the bill, they have to go back to committee and hash out the differences because you only can have one version and they have to be exactly the same to go to the president to sign.
Okay.
So it's a huge process. And I was heartened when Amy told me that she's not worried about it making it to the floor of the Senate anytime soon, but I don't trust that that's going to be the case going forward. I think they're going to keep working at it and trying to find ways to bring it to the floor.
It's horrifying. It's just horrifying. And the league has got to be involved and active in this
Right,
voting issue.
right,
But
right.
um,
Absolutely. That's what we're about. That's what you've been doing for 120 years is, registering people to vote and the league, which is wonderful that the US, Minnesota state, um, local leagues are all united. Sarah might want to talk about this. United, what is it? Unite. Sarah,
And
help me
right.
out here for just a second. Unite and Rise 8.5.
say that
And it's an
say
effort.
say that again.
Unite and Rise 8.5. And it's an initiative that leagues are participating in around the country to bring in 8.5 million more voters. And the Minneapolis League has a committee that's doing weekly Unite Defend
Bi-weekly.
Democracy initiatives. So you can go to our website and join us in we do a Zoom introduction to an issue. We bring in experts to talk about the issues. Right now, we're talking about incarceration without due process, which is a huge issue. And then next week or next month, it'll be another issue. So there's a lot going on around it. Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. So Kitty had done, so Monica Murphy and I are co-chairing the Women Defending Democracy Initiative from the Minneapolis League, which is based on the Unite and Rise effort from the National League. We've been doing it since June. We meet every other week. We've already addressed the SAVE Act, but we will do it again. We choose one issue at a time. And we're fortunate to have Kitty do an advocacy training for us. Lisa is also on the steering committee, and I think she said in her introduction that she was blown away by this presentation and felt that it really needed to get a wider audience within the league. But if you're interested in getting involved, we take action. We have an action sheet to call our representatives, to write emails, postcards, go to demonstrations. We're tracking our efforts. So, and we've learned a lot from Kitty about how to advocate for the issues. Our first issue was the SAVE Act. Our recent ones have been incarceration without due process, and we're doing one again on September 10th. Sometimes we have to follow up on these. Yeah, and we're also going to be doing a presentation. Karen Lundquist from the Bloomington League, is a lawyer, is going to be doing a presentation on the First Amendment. So Women Defending Democracy, Unite and Rise, we meet every other Wednesday at 5 p.m. Joanne, you're welcome to join us. Everyone is welcome to join us.
Where do you meet?
It's
Where?
on Zoom.
Oh,
So
Zoom.
yeah.
Okay.
If you, I'll put my email. I don't want to take up too much time. I'll put my email in the chat. And if you're interested in getting on our list, just email me and I will add you to our list. But if you're in the Minneapolis League, you should be getting possibly even getting one tomorrow, a notice about our next meeting, which will be on September 10th. So next week. So that's it. I don't want to take up more time, but thank you, Kitty. This was amazing. It's the second time I've heard it. I'm always learning something new from you. It's phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Kitty,
I just
Chris
want to
has
turn it
had
over
her
to
hand up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris has been patient. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, Chris, take it away.
I just wanted to say again how powerful this was, but also a couple questions. And yeah, after the November elections, I'm in there with the advocacy group. But number one, there are lawsuits already, aren't there, against the executive order and the SAVE Act, because it isn't legal in the Constitution for federal to take over state elections. Because it's in the Constitution that states have the power to determine how elections happen. So that's another good thing, if it can happen that way.
Well, before I forget, so when I was speaking to the federal attorney yesterday, what he was telling, because I said, well, there's lawsuits are coming down and they're kind of, it feels like some of the circuit courts are ruling against some of these executive orders and things. And he said, but there's been no rulings on the merit, and that's the most important thing. Finally, yesterday, there was a ruling on the merits of deportation. And that's what has to happen. And so that would be a good advocacy thing. We should talk about that, Sarah. Maybe we should get my attorney friend in the room with us and talk about how to encourage that to happen. So while there's lawsuits and we read them and you feel kind of good for a while that, yeah, this is going to change, but then, you know, it just keeps rolling forward because nobody's really stopping this freight train.
Until you get the hearing on the merit.
So it's got to be on merit. And so he was really pleased that they finally ruled on merit. I think it was the Texas 5th District, which is very conservative. So that was also really good. So go ahead, Chris.
But it is slow like that. And then it'll go to the Supreme Court and God knows what was going to happen. But that was at least another good piece of it. The other is, I want to ask you, it's about using proof of citizenship to register or even to be at the polls. Which is it? Can you register with proof of citizenship and get on a poll book, or do you have to carry your passport to the poll to vote? Because I got in an argument with a Republican about this, and I was pretty sure not only everything that I feel about it, but she was appalled if you had to actually take your passport to the polls.
I don't know that. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I don't have an answer. I don't know if there's anybody else on voter services here that might have that answer.
Not for the SAVE Act.
Okay,
Not for what the SAVE Act specifically says has to be at the polling place versus register.
Yeah.
And again, I can research that. I just thought maybe you'd know because it came up today for me. And then the other one is I've tried
That's a great question though.
Yeah.
It's important to know. Okay.
Because that was more aversive for this Republican than just having to show it at some point to register. You know, but the voter ID you have to do at the polls. So that's not enough just to register.
Right.
So it's all But I'll get you, Sarah. One other question I had, and thank you. I've tried to contact Emmer's office. I've tried to contact the representative in Rochester. And do you think that's effective? Because I usually get a cold shoulder and I get first thing asked if I'm in their ward. I mean, if I'm in their district. And is that a waste of time? I mean, and I could protest at their offices, and that to me isn't a waste of time, but.
Right. When you're communicating, if you don't have an address within their district, they're not going to pay much attention to it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And they make you say that.
Yeah. So we discourage that, but you have friends in those districts. And so,
I do. Yeah.
So I've done this so many times. I have a house in Tennessee. We go there in the winter. And so when I'm lobbying on things in Tennessee, suddenly I have a Tennessee address and I live in Tennessee. And it's kind of a little white lie, but they let me in their offices and they'll listen to me because I can write an address down. I've told people, do you have a friend that you can use an address? And, maybe that's pushing the limits a little bit, but some of the stuff is just so important.
The limits have already been pushed.
Yeah, exactly.
There is nothing to not using everything in the book. But, and I still have a Rochester zip code, area code on my phone, but that doesn't get me very far. Anyway, I yield to Sarah. I thank you, and I appreciate both that and the Minneapolis League work so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I have to shout out Chris. She's leading the forums this year, and there's so many of them, and it's just incredible. You're doing so much work. Thank you. Okay, Sarah.
So I just wanted to respond to the passport thing. Most Americans don't have a passport.
I know.
So that is not a requirement. I mean, you have to have proof of citizenship, and there are various ways to prove citizenship. Birth certificates, right? Birth certificates, all sorts of other ways. But basically, yes, you do have to bring something. I don't know if you need to bring them to the polls, but you do need it to register, right? So we're talking about new registrations or voters that have let their registration lapse. In Minnesota, if you voted every 4 years for the presidential elections, your registration continues. But if you miss one, then it lapses and you have to re-register. So, I mean, so I just wanted to state that. I mean, the passport is really only for us. I don't know what the percentage is, but
I was just using that as an example, but the question was at the polls or to register. But you're right. But this woman I was talking with, her husband doesn't have a passport, and he can't, because he was born overseas, and Social Security won't give him any of that stuff, and he can't get a passport. He was 6 years old when he came here, and so she listened because her husband can't do proof of citizenship.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. I just also wanted to say that we, on the Women Defending Democracy, we had Tina Smith's top staff do a session with us recently, and we discussed a lot of the things that Kitty is also discussing. And one of the things they said, Chris, about is the same thing that Kitty said, which is basically contacting only those who are, they're going to ask you if you're a constituent, and if you leave a message or you write a letter, make sure that you leave your address so that they can prove that, so that they can take it and say, my constituents are telling me this, and the other thing. And so, it's kind of a waste of time, right, Kitty, to be contacting.
Yeah. That's what I thought. I stopped, but thank you.
We are actually over time. So Kitty's been gracious to stay. I have not seen any questions in the chat, except no questions for Kitty in the chat. Logistical question. Well, it's good. No, but will there be a study guide? Will we get to see the slides? Yes.
You covered everything. So brilliant.
You did.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I honestly, I do appreciate everybody being here. I have such esteem for all of you and all the work you're doing and showing up and standing up and speaking up. And, like Anna said, may your dreaming never end and your voice never die. And with that, I will say good night.
You can say good night. I will say thank you to everyone who participated. This is part of advocacy as well. learning all about how we do it and how best to do it. And it's important to stay informed and to stay engaged. It can be difficult these days to feel like you can make a difference, but you really can. I also want to remind everyone that most likely starting tomorrow, the recording of tonight's Buzz and Kitty's talk will be able to be found on our website. And I will be sending out a study guide that will include the slides that she presented as well. Just a couple of announcements. I put in the chat, if you are a League of Minneapolis member and haven't done your organics recycling survey yet, it's just 3 questions. The link is in the chat. It can take you less than a minute. And then also, I was going to plug the Women Defending Democracy, but Sarah has done such a good job. I don't really have to say much about that, but the next one will be next Wednesday, September 10th. And you can find that information also on our League website. And then finally, our next Civic Buzz will be in 4 weeks, Thursday, October 4th, and this will be in person. We're still working on the location, but our guest will be appellate court immigration attorney Kari Hong, who has tried hundreds of cases in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and the issue of immigration. And so she's going to present her report on the new 2025 immigration policy, its origins and legal effective responses to it. So that should be a good one, and I hope that most of you can join us in person next month. That's all we've got. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night. Have a good night.